That's all right. We'll just go without the first slide. All right. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. Do appreciate it. Welcome for all of you who decided to brave this beautiful sunny day and come into our nice, wonderfully dark and cool room, where we're going to be talking about the upcoming Skagway Beach program. We're really excited about this. This is unfortunately don't have all the nice logos that are up there that represents the partnership that this is, but it's a partnership between Skagway Traditional Council, the department and the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, and the municipality of Skagway. And it's all funded by the Environmental Protection Agency. Really excited to get this going. With us on the phone is our project manager, Gretchen Augat, who's going to be here to answer any of the burning questions that you have as we go through all of this really fun and interesting information. It doesn't appear that we have anyone else on Zoom, so I won't go through all of that boilerplate housekeeping stuff about muting your microphones and that we are recording this section. And if you don't want your likeness to appear online, to just black out your video, you don't have to worry about all that. So we should just go ahead and look at the agenda. This is the way that I always like to start out any sort of talk like this. I like to have a roadmap. I like to tell you guys what you're in for, what kind of torture I'm going to subject you to, so that you just know what's going to be happening. So we're going to start out, we're just going to go over the basic history of the beach program, go into that background. And then we're going to talk about bacteria sources here in Skagway. And we're going to go over the beaches that we're going to be monitoring over the next couple of years. And then we're going to talk about what it is that we actually are sampling, because it's actually really interesting. We're going to talk about our collection methods and then the water quality criteria that we're going to be comparing our results to. And then we're going to talk briefly about public notifications. And then it's time for all of those questions that you've got. Everybody with me? Everybody feeling good? Gretchen, do you want to say anything to introduce yourself as we're sitting here before we get going?
Sure. My name is Gretchen Augat. I've been working with the Department of Environmental Conservation for a good 20 years now, and beach for quite a few years. I'm located in Juneau, and I am here to help Ruben and his staff do the best sampling that they can and notify the public if we do have some exceedances of bacteria.
Excellent. Gretchen's been so super helpful through this whole process. It's really very accommodating. We're happy to be working with her, happy to have her as our manager, and happy to have her here today. Thanks for taking time out of your afternoon.
Absolutely.
So shall we dive right in, so to speak? Get it? Most of the time, well, I've lost my clicker again. Oh. When I say the word beach, you might think of something like this, right? Beautiful, big, sandy. In this picture, it's not quite so sunny because it's after sunset, but it's usually a little sunnier, great place to catch some rays, maybe go beach combing, maybe take a dip, right? But we're here in the Upper Inlet, right? Probably looking at beaches more like that, right? This is what we're more used to, but this is still a beach, right? This is still access to the water. We're still able to go and pursue the recreational activities that we enjoy as beachgoers on the beach like this. Sure. So I'm assuming that everybody here is a beach enthusiast, right? We all like going to the beaches. What are some of the activities that you like to enjoy at the beach?
Warm sunshine.
Warm sunshine. Sure.
Swimming.
You like swimming? Yeah. Swimming's a good way to spend the afternoon, especially on a hot day like today, right? It's not that cold, and if it is, park up camper, you're fine. Any kayakers in the audience? I know we've got at least a couple kayakers, right? Yeah. We've got a lot of stand-up paddleboarders that hang out here in town. Dog walking is one of the big ones that I noticed. So at all of our beaches, we've got lots of folks that are taking their dogs out, going for walks on the beach. You can do some bird watching. You can just have a picnic, or just go and pick up some shells, whatever it is that you like to do. These are all beach activities, but when we choose these recreational beach activities that involve contact with the water, right? So swimming or getting in and out of a kayak, getting on a paddleboard. I would say even throwing a stick for your dog's going in that water, might come back and it's shaken off and you're getting water onto your skin and in your face. And some of that might go in your eyes or your mouth. And when we have these contact recreational activities, we run the risk of exposure to pathogens, right? If there is contamination present from human or animal waste, right? So yes, we're talking about food, right? It's my salmon in the classroom students' favorite subject. We always like to giggle about this a little bit, but it's something that we need to be thinking about. Fecal pollution can harbor disease-causing microbes, right? Bacteria, viruses, and the EPA has determined that bacteria are responsible for much of the coastal water quality impairments that we see all across the nation. And so if you're going to get sick from some of these pathogens, it could range from gastrointestinal and respiratory illnesses to skin rashes, or you might get eye, ear, and wound infections. So recognizing this, Congress back in 2000 passed the Beaches Environmental Assessment and Coastal Health Act, right? The Beach Act. Doesn't that work out nicely? Nice little acronym that makes sense. Sometimes they don't. And this is an amendment to the Clean Water Act. We all know what the Clean Water Act is. Yeah. So this amendment directed states, tribes, and territories with coastal recreational waters to re-examine and update their water quality criteria. And it also enabled the EPA to distribute grant funds to states and tribes for establishing monitoring programs to assess that water quality of these recreational beaches. So in our neck of the woods, DEC developed the Alaska Beach Program. I had high hopes of coming up with a map to show you all the communities that have been involved with this, but I'll just rattle off a laundry list here: Anchorage, Dillingham, Douglas Island, Haines, Homer, Hoonah, Juneau, Kasilof, Kenai, Ketchikan, King Salmon, Naknek, Nome, Petersburg, and Wrangell. These have all been participants in the beach program over the years. And so this year, DEC is adding Kodiak and Skagway. So we're going to be participating in this program that's been implemented all over the state. And DEC has just done such a fantastic job. The whole process is really very, very well streamlined to assess your beaches and develop and implement the programs. So DEC established beach survey and ranking protocols. They established a program handbook, which you guys can access on the Skagway Beaches website through DEC, and a lot of the information that I drew for this talk came from the beach handbook. It's a really, really nice document. They also developed a generic quality assurance project plan template, and we call it a QAP. And what a QAP does is it guides on the ground efforts. It very clearly defines what sort of protocols are going to be used. It makes the data that we collect legal and defensible, so that if we do issue an advisory, we can say, well, it was all done, according to this project plan, which has been vetted through DEC. I believe EPA as well has probably vetted some of this, but I could be wrong on that. Gretchen, you might be able to correct that for me.
Yes, EPA is involved in that, and they helped us out with doing the generic QAP.
Yeah, it seems to follow the general EPA template that we've been following for all of the projects that we do here at STC. Have to have a QAP that's approved at the EPA, so the data that we collect are legal and defensible. And then DC also developed a general communication plan for reporting conditions to the public once we get test results back. And so if the goal of the beach program is to protect recreational users like yourself, communication is really key. We need to be able to get this information to you quickly and efficiently so that everybody has the information to make informed decisions. So we began the application process in 2020, beginning with an initial survey of recreational beaches that identified the degree of use by the public and also the potential sources. So it makes sense now to kind of go over what some of those potential sources of fecal contamination could be. So let's see if we can make this, ooh, it's working. This lovely little animation go as we come up to the old waterfront of Skagway. So one of the most obvious falls under what we call a point source, right? And a point source is where the source of pollution can be positively identified, right? And so one of the point sources that we have here in Skagway is the municipal wastewater treatment facility outfall and diffuser. And this injects treated effluent into the waters off the end of the state ferry dock there, about 400 feet offshore, and it's about 55 feet below the mean lower low water line. And the Skagway wastewater treatment facility outfall incorporates what's called a mixing zone, where marine water quality standards for fecal coliform are permitted to be exceeded. And this extends in a 1,600 meter radius around the center of that outfall of diffusion. Okay, but that's not the only wastewater treatment facility that we have here in town, because the cruise ships that come and dock at the front, at the port here, they all have a wastewater treatment facility on board as well, right? And so we've got 4 berths. They're sitting there, and not all the cruise ships are going to be discharging. Some of them don't have a permit to discharge in the harbor, but some of them do. The ones that do, we don't know whether or not they're discharging every time they're in port, but it is a potential source for that fecal contamination, right? So that would be another point source. Another source would be small boats in small boat harbor, right? You got yourself a little boat going out, and you got a latrine on there, and you discharge that stuff out in the harbor. You know, this is another potential source. Stormwater outfalls. This could be another source. What I've got up here on the map right now is just the outfall locations themselves, those little yellow dots. But I think it's better if we look at a whole map of the stormwater system. This was mapped out by the Watershed Council several years ago. All of these little red dots that you see on here, these are what are known as catch basins, basically a storm drain, right? So all these storm drains are picking up bits and pieces from the impervious surfaces, and they're channeled into these pipes where they are then ejected either into Pullen Creek or into the Skagway River, right? And it seems like this would be a point source, right? Because there it is, that's the point where it's coming from. But because this is stuff that's coming from all over this micro watershed, we can't positively identify that source, right? So we call this a non-point source. So as that water is rolling through the watershed, it's picking up bits of animal poop and other contaminants, and it's directing that into these waterways that are then putting it out into the marine system. So septic systems, this can be another potential non-point source of fecal contamination, but only if they're not functioning properly. Right? A properly functioning septic system should do a good job in keeping that fecal contamination from entering into the watershed. So I've got this map shown here. You see all the orange dots up there, and there's a big caveat here. And that's that each one of those data points is associated with a private parcel that has a structure on it, as I was able to identify through satellite analysis. I wasn't able to find a data set for permitted septic systems here in Skagway, but this just kind of gives you a basic approximation of what the potential is there for septic systems. Every single one of those could be functioning pristinely, or many of them could not. This just for your information, just where the potential for these sources is coming from, right? And then finally, we've got lots of critters around, right? We've got both wild and domestic critters that are creating wastes and contributing to pollution, either in the watershed and going into that stormwater system or directly on the beach, right? So with these potential sources in mind, let's just take a look at the 5 beaches that we have identified during the survey process and which sources may be influencing them. So you've got these little blue upside down cones here. These are the 5 beaches that we'll be monitoring at. We'll just start over here on the east side. So Small Boat Harbor, we've seen kayakers, paddleboarders, and dog walkers using this little area in between the 2 docks, launching their crafts or walking their dogs, or taking I've never actually seen anyone take a dip in the Small Boat Harbor, but as you get into your kayak, you're coming in contact with the water. And this is all close to the influence of small boats, right? The cruise ships, that wastewater treatment facility outfall, and wildlife as sources of contamination. And then we've got this little beach that's just to the west of the Ore Peninsula. We've seen lots of people launching paddleboards from there, landing a kayak. I see dog walkers out there all the time. I think I've even seen some swimmers cruising around. I'm in the Skagway River right there in waders. I'm coming in contact with the water that's coming down the river pretty much every other day during the Yukon sampling season. So there is some contact recreation that's happening down at this beach. And as you can see from the map, it's we're within the mixing zone of the wastewater treatment facility. There's these stormwater outfalls here that are at the south end of the runway. And then we've also got some septic systems up on the hill, and of course, wildlife leavings everywhere. Then there's this little small pocket beach off to the west of Yakutania Point. We're calling that Yakutania West. And it's a great place to walk a dog. It's a nice place to get out of the waves if you're on a kayak or a paddleboard. We've seen people jumping off the rocks on Yakutania Point to get out of the heat during the summer times when it gets really hot. Great place to get little beach treasures or even have a picnic, right? There's a picnic table and a fire ring. So there's lots of different uses at Yakutania West, and we're still within that mixing zone of the wastewater treatment facility outfall, right? And then we're also downhill from some of those septic systems, and of course wildlife groups, lots of them. Smuggler's Cove, that's another little safe haul out spot if you're flying around in the waves out there in your kayak and you need to get out. Smuggler's Cove is a nice little spot where you can tuck in and stop for a little break. It's a good spot to throw a stick in the water for your dog. There's mussels that are growing all over the rocks there. There's and you could probably even go for a swim there if you wanted to. There's nice rocks to jump off, and it's pretty nice. And it's just outside of that mixing zone, but it's still subject to those septic systems and wildlife that abounds everywhere. And finally, we've got the beach at the head of Naku Bay, right? Local favorite. Lots of people like going out there. It's probably the closest that we have to a classic beach here in Skagway outside of Dyea. And it's got some septic systems around it, and there's lots of wildlife influences as well. So, did I miss any beaches? Can you guys think of any other beaches that are high use in this area, close to these influences? What do you think?
There's like Lost Cove to the right of Yakutania.
Oh, yeah, yep. We were going to do Yakutania East. But we decided that Airport Beach would probably be enough of a representation, and just with limited funds, we cut it back to these 5 sites. But you're definitely right. There's a lot of action at that beach as well. Lots of folks going down there. It's a nice spot to walk around. But hopefully Airport Beach will give us good information. So we've identified our beaches. So let's talk about sampling. Hey, and that's a phytoplankton net. That's not the way we're going to be sampling, but it's the picture that we have. We haven't actually gone out and done the sampling yet. The goal of the beach program is to monitor for fecal contamination, right? So what is it that we're sampling for? Would it make sense to test for all the different viruses and bacteria and protozoa that could possibly be pathogenic and cause human illness? So maybe there's a lot of them. There's a lot of different species that are potentially going to cause some illness, and each one of those would probably require a different test. So it would be prohibitive in the sense of cost and in the sense of manpower. So what we do instead is we focus on what are called fecal indicator bacteria. And these are the bacteria that are present in warm-blooded animal guts, right? We've got our gut flora, and they're helping us to digest substances that would otherwise be undigestible. A lot of animals have this symbiotic relationship. And the thing that's cool about FIBs, fecal indicator bacteria, is they can be used as a surrogate to measure the sanitary quality of water. So we're going to be looking at enterococci and fecal coliforms during our study as these surrogates, these fecal indicator bacteria. So Enterococcus has been identified by the EPA as probably the most efficient surrogate for water quality status. And we'll be using it to determine when water quality exceeds the benchmarks for contact recreation, right? Those instances where you're coming into contact with the water. Fecal coliforms are also good indicators of water quality, and we're going to be using them to determine whether or not recreational waters are suitable for the consumption of raw aquatic life. Anybody like oysters? Anybody eat them raw? I love them raw. I mean, for me, that's the best way to eat it. I love sushi. I haven't actually tried sea urchin, but I hear that there's some folks that like to eat raw sea urchin. And don't forget that we've got over 1 million passengers coming in on cruise ships from all sorts of different nationalities, right? And so, we might not think of going out to Naku Bay and eating a raw mussel as a good idea, but there are certainly people that are showing up in Skagway where that would not be out of the norm. Right, so we want to be looking at these fecal coliforms so we can determine whether or not it's safe for people to consume raw quality. So our sampling program starts next week, May 23rd. Holy moly, it came up really quick. So field staff, which is myself and our lead field sampler, Colton, we've been trained to collect samples in a sanitary manner, right? We're sampling for bacteria, so it's important that we're not cross-contaminating our samples. I love the example that Gretchen gives, is that, you know, you don't want to be sitting there leaning up against your car with seagull poop all over it and then going and jumping into the water and collecting yourself and your car's bacteria matter, right? We got to do this according to the book, so that we're collecting the most representative sample from the waters where we're collecting them. We also have strict protocols to ensure that our samples reach the laboratory in time. We have a 6-hour holding time that we have to adhere to, and it needs to be within a certain temperature range so that we're not encouraging bacterial growth, so that, again, that sample would be unrepresentative of the waters that we're sampling. All of our beaches will be sampled for both fecal coliforms and enterococci. We're going to be taking duplicate samples every single event so that we can look at those numbers and compare them. And if the duplicate's way off from the regular sample, then we know that we've done something wrong in our process and we'll have to correct that action. Hopefully we'll never run into that. We're also going to be conducting a beach survey to look at conditions at each site, right? The number of beach users, how much wildlife is there, was there a recent rainstorm? We'll be collecting environmental parameters like air and water temperature, the clarity of the water, which is turbidity, how acidic the water is, the pH, how much salt there is in the water, the salinity, and dissolved oxygen. And we're going to be doing this on a weekly basis from May through September. Why this time period? Anybody think of why we're doing this time period? This is when we recreate, right? This is the recreational season. And Skagway is a little bit unique because we do have the mermaids who hang out in Naku Bay in January, cruising around on paddleboards and wetsuits, right? But the majority of folks are going to be using these beaches in a contact recreation during these months, May through September. So this is kind of when the schedule has been set for us to go out there and check it out. Samples are going to be flown down to Juneau. We've contracted Admiralty Environmental, who will process and analyze our samples using accepted EPA methods for determining bacterial concentration. But remember, we want that legal and defensible data. Admiralty Environmental is an EPA approved lab. So they're doing everything by the book. So far, they've been just fantastic to work with. And so additionally, one of the things I'm really excited about, we're going to be collecting samples once per season to perform what's called microbial source tracing. And be using qPCR. It's kind of along the same lines of what we're doing with our Eulicon eDNA. But we're going to be able to differentiate between the different types of warm-blooded animals that are contributing that fecal contamination. And we're going to look for the most biologically active site. Right? We'll look at our data and we determine that Yakutia West is the hottest beach, then we'll probably focus our efforts there for the microbial source tracing. And we're going to be looking at 3 different animals. We're going to be looking at human, gull, and dog. Right? And we'll be able to tell where is this contamination coming from. I think that's just going to be really, really cool. So here we go with a little bit of the boring stuff. I'm not going to explain this super well, but I think it's important just to kind of get a little bit of a basis for the benchmarks that we're going to be comparing our laboratory results to. So there's a little bit of math when we're doing this. We're going to be using 2 criteria for each bacteria. The first is a measure of 10% of samples collected at each site, and the second is a geometric mean over 30 days for each site, right? So the first one makes sense, right? If 10% of the samples exceed the criteria, the water at that site fails the standard, and we would issue an advisory. Right? Does that make sense? And I think it works out the way 10% is basically one or 2 samples. So 10% of the samples fail that standard, we will issue an advisory. Geometric means a little bit of a different beast, right? We've all heard of the mean, right? We all know what a mean is. When I say that I make a mean lasagna, I'm saying that I make a very average lasagna, right? It's just, you add up all the lasagnas out there and you divide it by the number of lasagnas and you have the arithmetic mean. What the arithmetic mean doesn't really deal with well is variation in a data set or outliers in a data set. You can have the central tendency here, and you have these values that are way over on either side of it. The arithmetic mean just really doesn't deal with that well. And this can be a problem when you're calculating ratios for everybody's favorite compound interest, or incidentally, when you're dealing with the growth of bacteria, where values can range anywhere from 10 to 10,000 fold. So taking the geometric mean is a more robust way of dealing with these types of data sets. You guys all still with me here? All right, so here's your math problem for you can't leave the building until you solve this. This is the geometric mean, or I'm just for the nerds out there, this is how we calculate the geometric mean. So the state of Alaska has adopted the following criteria for fecal indicator bacteria, right? For contact recreation, 10% of the samples may not exceed 130 enterococci colony forming units for 100 milliliters. And that might sound like Greek to you. But Gretchen, do you have a good explanation for colony forming units? Do we need to go that deep into it, or can we just call it CFUs?
CFUs is good. It's just counting the colonies that form over that time period, the 24 hours.
24-hour incubation. So there's that standard. The 30-day geometric mean may not exceed 35 enterococci CFUs per 100 milliliters. Now, harvesting for consumption of raw aquatic life is a little bit different, where 10% of the samples may not exceed 31 fecal coliform CFUs per 100 milliliters. And the 30-day geometric mean may not exceed 14 fecal coliform CFUs per 100 milliliters. So we've got our sample sites. We know what we're sampling for. We've got our criteria that we're going to compare all of this to. So what do we do if one or more of our beaches fails that criteria? Well, this was my idea, but it got shot down. I think we should just throw up the old poo signal, but probably not going to be practical here in Skagway. So what we've done is with DEC, we've developed a communication plan to help report these exceedances in a timely manner. Right? We want to get this information out to you as quickly as we can. So we have rush reporting for enterococci from Admiralty if these benchmarks are surpassed. There will be posts on DEC website. We're going to do social media blasts, so you'll see it on Skagway Swap and Bulletin Board, the STC site, probably do Skagway Naturally. There is an email listserv. If you guys aren't on it and you want on it, talk to us. We can get you on there. The state will send out an email if any of the criteria, if any of the beaches fail the criteria. We're going to work with KHNS to do radio announcements, let people know. And then there will also be beach advisory signage posted at the affected beaches if a beach fails the criteria. We'll work with the municipality on that to set up that code. So that's the beach program in a nutshell, and that's what I've got for you guys today. Thanks so much for sitting and listening to me yak about it. I hope you learned a thing or two. And please, we've got Gretchen here on the line to help answer questions. We've got cookies and coffee, and it's nice and cool. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Well, when you're thinking about your questions, I just wanted to clarify a couple things. So if any sample exceeds the enterococci criteria, that's when we'd issue an advisory. So if it's there and it's over our limit, we'll let you know. And as soon as the lab gets it to us, it's like within a half an hour. We got the web page is updated. It's got this really cool GIS interactive map. So you can just kind of scroll over it and you can get a whole bunch of data on each data point. And it'll be super clear because it'll be red for there's an advisory out, or green. It's good to go. And then the other thing is that we send out a listserv every week, even if there's nothing going on. We have a lot of beaches that we've sampled that have not had any sources that are contributing enough to have advisories. Like Huna, we did their beaches for the past 2 years and they didn't have any. So, but we still send out a listserv saying, hey, this is the numbers that we caught, the results of last week's or of yesterday's sample.
Questions? In the other communities that this testing has been done, has this been an issue often, or is this more rare, or in what communities have had these alerts raised?
Really good question. Yet we've had 2 out of all the samples, all communities that we've have entered into the program over the last since the early 2000s. One is Ketchikan. So we sampled beaches all along the coastline. So there's 13 of them in Ketchikan, and they all had exceedances. They have a lot of different bacteria sources on the coastline in Ketchikan. At least 4 different sources at each different point. So say a total of like maybe 10 or 8 or 10 sources throughout the whole area. Every beach had at least 4 sources that are potentially contributing to the bacteria at the beach. So those are actually listed with the EPA as impaired beaches locations. And we have a plan together. It's a watershed management plan to improve those areas and decrease those sources. So we're hoping to, as we go along with making those improvements, that we'll be able to take those beaches off the impaired waters list. And that'll be a good thing. The other location is the Kenai River, and it's just the mouth of the Kenai. We have had exceedances there for enterococci, but we found out through the microbial source tracking that it was actually gulls that was contributing that bacteria. We didn't hardly saw any human at all. Human is the bacteria that would so it's a DNA marker, and it's human is contributing to the bacteria. That's when folks get sick, get ill. And when it comes to gulls, we don't generally get sick if there's gull poop. So that's why we'd like to do that DNA testing to figure out, is this a real serious problem, or is it just, wildlife, and wildlife's everywhere. So Kenai did not get listed for impaired waters, but what they do is they have best management practices. The city of Kenai's done a terrific job. They'll rake the beaches. They have an information pamphlet when you walk, when you go in. You have to go through like a drive shack or a fee shack, and it tells you when you are filleting your fish after or preparing them or whatever, throw your carcass back into the water so the nutrients continually go into the water. We want to see that, but they're not sitting on the beach. The gulls are not coming from the gull rookery that's right upstream, coming over, eating the carcasses and then pooping right there. So trying to stop that type of pathway of getting more bacteria on the beaches. Let's see. They've done a few other things. And so they rake it and to make sure that there's no, in the evening, I believe, or, when people aren't on it, to get the carcasses off there. If they are, people are tossing them on the beach instead. Yeah, so that's made a big difference at the Kenai, but those are the only 2 that we've noticed throughout the state. Some beaches have had just like a little spike, just a little bit over 130. Most probable number. So MPN, per 100 milligrams, milliliters. So just a little bit over that, but it hasn't failed the criteria. So yeah, so just two locations throughout the state. Good question.
Gretchen, I have a question.
Sure.
Is there other, I know Ketchikan has a lot of cruise ships as well. Is there other similar communities like maybe Juneau or Sitka or maybe somewhere like that that's more similar to ours that are testing, or are they not testing?
So Juneau has tested, and Ketchikan has a ton of cruise ships in there, but we have to recognize that the cruise ships have a tertiary wastewater treatment system, and they are regulated incredibly much. So So when they take, they have to show us that they're discharging clean water, and they have a lower criteria than what we're looking at for recreational. So when I say tertiary, it's the wastewater treatment plant in Ketchikan is primary. So it just settles out. So they are 2 steps above most municipal areas. Treatment systems are usually primary or secondary. Secondary is what everyone's trying to strive for, but there is a handful of primaries still out there that have a waiver through EPA, which is looking like, from what I've seen in the news lately, it looks like EPA is looking to see if they can upgrade those or try to improve those treatment systems. And of course, it's going to cost quite a bit of funding. So it is the start of, okay, we need to improve these. And how do we do it? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, do you know Skagway's primary? Yeah, thought so. Ruben was not in his.
I thought that I had just seen some documents come through that said that the municipality is looking to upgrade the system. And they're in the permitting process right now, I think.
Yeah.
EPA.
But we don't have the problem now that the ore terminal has closed down, but the ore ships would come in and dump their ballast water in the bay here, and you don't know where that water comes from. And it could be, bacteria and stuff coming from another country.
That is something that the cruise ship, our section here, cubicles right next to me, they're working on the ballast sampling and that whole issue and looking into it.
Especially when they do it in port, right? Like here in Skagway, where
Yeah.
some dump it probably as they're coming in, but some dump it right when they dock, and then they dump it all out of their ship.
So
Several hours before they get it all pumped out before they can go to the water.
So they do have permits. So DEC does have permits where the cruise ships can discharge treated waste at port. A lot of cruise ships are not doing that because of their perception. So, a lot of the ones that are coming into Ketchikan are deciding not to, and just to do it underway when they're out. So there won't be any question of whether they're contributing to the the bacteria that's in the water in Ketchikan. So yeah, definitely check out the DEC webpage, and it's really neat. You've got your own tab, Skagway, right at the top there, Skagway Beach. A lot of good information, like frequently asked questions. Can I swim in the water? Can I eat the fish? All of that stuff is there, and we'll update it as we go along because we don't have any data yet from Skagway. But it also just all the social media that's going to go by. So DEC, if we do have an advisory, we'll have a social media post come out, and then Ruben will also spread it out with your individual local social media posts. So that'll help get the word out. Then we've got the listserv email that I send out once a week, and they'll definitely, if there is an advisory, you'll have a sign posted at the beach. And like Ruben was saying, he's looking into doing like a little radio spot. Trying to think of any other ways that we communicate with you on that one. I think that's it. But if there's another way that you can think of that reaches more people, let us know, and we can work on that.
Yeah, bulletins on the bulletin boards around town. I mean, we could definitely do that if that's going to be more effective for reaching a wider audience of folks. We wanted get the information out there.
Maybe talk to the newspaper about putting a banner or
Oh, yeah.
something on their website,
That's
because
a good idea.
people do go and read articles every now and then.
So we're going to get 2 good years of data here, and we're excited. It's taken a while. Ruben wanted to do this a couple of years ago, but we were still working with the last 3 communities. So we're excited that we can do 5 different beaches, because some of the locations only have 1 beach that they are sampling for, and we were able to do more here, have a little bit more funding for Skagway, and also Ruben wrote an incredibly good application with a tight budget, so we were able to do it all.
Yeah, I
Thank you,
appreciate
Ruby.
Ruben being here too, for sure, you know. I was in the watershed for 7 years and all we did was clean streams and that was about it. And, so I'm glad that he's here and working for SDC and doing all these tests, which we did. We didn't send any water samples out or anything like that. Kind of reminds me of, you know, in Subport. They didn't have inside bathrooms, they had bathrooms on the dock that went into the bay. And I thought, wow, that's how Skagway was too, when they first had a boat harbor. They thought, oh yeah, just put it in the bay, it'll get washed out, you know, they get clean water back. But they don't think that about how much it's getting into the ground.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, I went to Wrangell Institute, and in front of Wrangell Institute, there's a beach there. And we used to dig clams, cockle shells, all kinds of different clams. And I went there several years later, this is like 20 or 30 years later. And I couldn't believe the smell of the beach before. It was just nice, clean beach.
Interesting.
And of course, Skagway, they had changed the dump several times. It used to be at the south end of the airport, you know, went up by the tank farm. Then it went up on the hill. Yeah, so it's been several places, but when they started dumping in the river, I thought, wow, what did they do? But they could.
Thank goodness.
So if you see Ruben and his staff running through on a beach day when he's collecting samples, don't ask questions and don't stop him, because he has 6 hours to collect those samples, go all the way out to the way out in the bay, get all of those 5, get them on pack them all up, write a chain of custody form and detailed so it's legally and defensible, wrap it all up and get it on the plane. So it's going to be he's going to be moving.
Yeah, it's gonna be, we'll be cooking, and I think the construction out on the Dairy Road is gonna complicate things just a little bit, but we've altered our plan. We're gonna start with Naku Bay, so we only have to go through that one-way road once. And yeah, we should be good to go.
Yeah.
We're excited to get going. We really love our elbow length trucks. We're using them for half now too.
I got to get me some of those. I only have the short ones.
Oh, these are great. Yeah, impervious. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everybody. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Gretchen, for joining us and staying after 5. And
Absolutely. Oh, one other thing that we wanted to mention, Ruben's going to put together a report at the end of the year, and then we're going to talk about it, have another one of these and tell you what's in the report. And I'll do that again next year. And those will be on the website and you can get copies, and there's going to be a nice little summary in the beginning. It's not going to be like this big, long, drawn out report. It's just, we've cut them way down to just give you the information that you need without boring you, you know. So if you have any other questions while you're reading it, or if you look over it, you know, just definitely Ruben or myself can help you work that through.
Thank you.
Thank
Very good.
you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. Talk to you later.
Soon.